I snuck out. And when I came back home later that day, he was gone. But yeah, I had to sneak out of my own house. I was just sitting in my room all night, scared. And he was sitting out just outside my door. I couldn't get to the phone. So he was just out there the whole time. He ended up falling asleep on the couch. And the next morning, my ride came to get me. And it was another friend of mine. And I told her what had happened. And she took me to the clinic. And they had they did a rape kit on me. And they gave me the day after pill just to make sure. And they took pictures and encouraged me to have him charged. But I was afraid to. There had been other things that had happened in my life as well, and they didn't go so well through court. So I didn't want to put myself through that again. And after that day, he stalked me. Like, there was times where my mom, because especially when she knew I'd fight back, she knew if she freaked out enough and she woke my dad up out of sleep, he'd come downstairs. Because he would never do anything to her, it always came at me. And there was one time in particular, I remember my dad was woken up by my mom screaming over something so stupid. And I just kept trying to tell her, just like, you don't need to yell right now. Just be quiet. Like, none of this needs to be like this. So my dad came downstairs and he was upset because he was woken up. And of course, my mom's screaming at him. So I'm screaming at her. I was sitting in the chair and he came at me and he started choking me out. And my boyfriend at the time didn't know what to do. He was like in shock. I just remember I picked my feet up and I kicked him and pushed my dad way back. And I jumped up out of the chair and I put my fist up and I basically called my dad on. And then I ran out of the house. And my boyfriend chased me and he just apologized. He was like, I didn't even know what to do. I'm sorry, I didn't even know what to do.
What's up, beautiful people? It's your favorite light, M Boogie in this thing. Welcome to the Confidence Way podcast, where we shine a light on the darkness that is domestic violence and abuse. If you've never been here before, welcome to the show. We have 3 simple goals: to educate, empower, and encourage. We are here to educate anyone who's never been in an abusive relationship, doesn't understand abusive relationships, might be in one and don't know it, and just want to know why people stay. We're going to find out. We are here to empower all of our survivors to stand up and share your story without shame, fear, guilt, or judgment, because you are strong, you are powerful, and your voice deserves to be heard. And for everyone who's currently suffering in silence, listen, you are not alone. You are not crazy. Abuse is not normal. Your feelings are valid. And despite how it may look and feel in this very moment, there's always a way out. So we encourage you to seek support. Now let's go ahead and do this thing. We got to rise above these insecurities, release the burdens of shame and guilt, and revive our God-given power, purpose, and passion the confidence way, because we about to light it up. I don't know where you are. I don't know what you're doing, but you are tuned in today for another amazing episode of the Confidence Way podcast, and we are super excited to have you here. Thank you for allowing us to create this space and share our stories so that we can help bring more light to all of this ugliness that is domestic violence and abuse, and so that you can learn or perhaps be more aware for your own self. On today's episode, we have the beautiful, amazing, magnificently wonderful, gifted, gorgeous light, but a lot of people call her Jennifer. Miss Jennifer, how are you doing today, sis?
I'm doing really well, actually. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for coming on our show and just being vulnerable and courageous enough to share your experiences. I know that sharing our stories is something that's positive on our healing journeys, each individual journey, but it's also a great way for us to, I guess, pay it forward and hopefully help someone who's currently suffering in silence or may have potentially entered into a relationship. Hopefully our stories will help them to not only see the red flags, but pay attention to them and go the complete opposite direction. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
It's bananas out here in these streets, y'all. So we're going to get started. I don't know how this story is going to go, but I just want to go ahead and say this. Keep your hands, arms, legs, and appendages inside the vehicle at all times, because it just might be another one of those bumpy rides. Jennifer, I got to start with this. Prior to getting into an abusive relationship, had you ever seen or experienced abuse growing up, or seen any family members or friends that you know of that have been in abusive relationships?
Well, sadly, I'll have to say, um, I have always been in an abusive relationship. And it started when I was a child with my mother. And I think it's been something that's continued throughout my life. Um, I think that sometimes, without realizing it, we are we become a victim of our environment, and we learn from the people that are the adults that we're supposed to look up to, and they teach us how we should be treated. And sometimes we don't realize as children that how we're being treated isn't like everybody else, right? Um, in my case, though, I was young, but I was pretty wise. And I knew that um, how I felt and how I was being treated wasn't right, and it wasn't okay, and it didn't feel good. So it started, yeah, it basically started ever since I can remember.
That was your memory of your childhood, like from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Wow. And I'm going to ask some questions. If you're not comfortable answering, that's perfectly fine too. But when you say that you've been experiencing the abuse from your mother, was your father around?
Yes. Yeah, he was. My dad was, I don't know if he was afraid of my mom or if he just didn't like conflict, or maybe he just didn't know what to do. But when she would start, he would get up and he would just leave the house, and he'd come back like hours later and actually pretend like nothing happened. So he never really protected me. He just left. So
Are you an only child?
yes.
So when your mom, like, what was happening? Was she more of a verbal abusive type of person, making you feel bad, talking bad about you? Like, how did that look?
She was mental, emotional, and physical. And it all started. So when I was born 3 months premature, and I was 1 pound 14 ounces when I was born. And the doctors told my parents like way in advance that they didn't think I was going to live anyway. Because back then, babies that were that small just didn't survive. So when I actually was stronger than they thought I was going to be, and I was doing okay, I was in the hospital for 3 months until I kind of had gained weight and I could go home. But what they didn't realize at the time was that because I was born premature, that it could cause developmental issues, learning disabilities. So I ended up with dyslexia, and my mom could never. She never accepted the fact that I had dyslexia, because she wanted an A student. You had to be an A student, or you're an embarrassment to her. And I went through that forever. Like, teachers back then, they didn't understand it, so they made fun of me too. I had a few good teachers, but a lot of really crappy ones. And Um, I just remember as a child, it was a hard life because I didn't want to go home because I knew every day was the belt because her favorite speech was, if you don't get the marks at school, you're going to get them at home. And she did. And I couldn't learn like everybody else. And there was no one there to really teach me how to learn. And I just felt like really confused, right? Like, just why am I so different? Um, and then kids picked on me too, because I was also on top of it all, had the biggest eyes, and I also had red hair, and I was just like nobody else was like me, right? So I just kind of stuck out to everybody as a target. And even teachers, they would kind of make fun because I would switch things around. So when I would mean to put was, I'd put saw, things like that. I wouldn't even notice that I did it. And sometimes I would read it like that as well. And so yeah. So it was hard. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to be at home. I didn't really know where I should be, and I didn't know where I would fit. So
I can't even imagine growing up with that kind of, I don't know, just a prison. And then for no one as an adult that you were around or exposed to even try to understand or help you. And then for the teachers to be like that is just ridiculous. It does shine a light on the fact that conversations really need to be had. And a lot of times students, I mean, you're already at a vulnerable stage anyways, because you're going from everything you know at home to being exposed to the result of all sorts of different household upbringings, and kids who are in their own situation try to deflect their insecurities by pointing out or hurting somebody else. And so to go through that and not have anyone to talk to and not have adults around to communicate, I just bring that point up. If there's any teachers watching or even parents, we have to be more diligent and intentional about creating a safe space for conversation with children.
mhm,
Otherwise, we have people grow up who are insecure, and then we make decisions out of insecurities and we end up in bad situations. And the other people who make decisions out of insecurities are the people causing the bad situations. So
it's
no
true.
one wins. So, gosh, okay. So this is from elementary school all the way through college, basically.
Yeah, basically. Like I think that the way I grew up, it you're right. It makes you insecure. It steals your um self-worth. It kind of, in a sense, it sets you up for failure and to be in situations where you don't even realize that it's not appropriate, where I've had a lot of really big hurts in my life, um especially with men, and I guess I allowed things I shouldn't have allowed. And I when people speak to me, even to this day, I actually just realized just recently, even though I'm doing a lot of work on myself and I'm becoming stronger, and I just released a very toxic relationship. And I mean, just in like February. Um, Still, when people speak to me like I'm garbage, it doesn't even phase me. Like, I don't bat an eye because I'm so used to being spoken to that way that I'm actually I'm numb to it, like desensitized. So
That's insane. For you to go your entire life and have to bear the burdens of someone else's insecurities. It's enough to be insecure ourselves, but then to have someone else project their insecurities on you in a way that hurts you is just, it's disappointing that there are people in the world like that. And side note, I'm sure you know this.
Yeah.
Your eyes and your hair are gorgeous. Just FYI.
Hmm.
So
Thank you.
I have big eyes too. We're the big eyes club. But
I think that's a good thing now, right?
it is. It is. So you get through junior high, high school. Do you get into any relationships while you're still living with your parents, or is it something that comes later after you graduate and go off to college? If you
Um,
even went to college.
I did. And I had a relationship when I was in high school, and my mom actually had set me up with him. And I was 16 years old, and he was 21. And now I look at my two girls, and I look at so when my daughter was 16 per se, I looked at her and I thought to myself, I would never allow my daughter to date someone who is 21 years old. I think back and I'm like, wow, like what was that all about? Like, cause I mean, like he wasn't too bad. He was very jealous. He was very controlling. It seems to be a theme in my life. Um, and he was like my first for everything. Right. So, um, and he even wanted to push me into getting married to him. And I was so young. I was like, he was more ready than me, right? He was in university, he was in his 20s, and I'm still in high school and I'm looking at going to college. And um, I really wanted to have my own life. Like I really wanted to do something for me. And he didn't approve. Um, I also mentioned too, at that point in my life, I was in modeling and I was modeling over in the United States. And he was very, very jealous of that. He did not like me doing the modeling. It made him feel very insecure. So it was always a big problem between us. And when I finally was able to go to college, I broke off the relationship. And it took him a long time to accept that. And then I, I had a few little like short relationships while I was in college the first time. Like I don't know how much information you want. Like I I have a story that just is, I don't know.
Oh, we're gonna get there. Don't worry. I'm talking. I got questions already. So
Okay.
my first question is about your mom and your dad's relationship, because you're 16 and she's sets you up with a 21-year-old and you've never been in a relationship before. Do your parents have an age gap or anything?
Mhm. Yeah.
How old is their gap and who's the oldest?
My dad was, and there was 20 years between them.
Are you serious?
I have two half sisters that are pretty much the same age as my mother.
Do you know anything about your mom's upbringing?
Yeah.
Was there any kind of abusiveness going on with what she grew up around and your grandparents?
Um, well, I know one thing, like of course they grew up, if you did something wrong, you got the belt or whatever and or wooden spoon, because that's how I grew up too. Like that's how my mom treated me. Plus other stuff too. But my mother was the only girl and she had three brothers and she was spoiled. She was always spoiled. So she always got what she wanted. And my grandmother, even though my grandmother was really good with me, she was kind of critical of my mom, and my grandfather spoiled my mom. So
That explains a lot.
mm,
That explains a lot, and that supports why we have to have these conversations, because if it's not talked about, it just continues to pass down from generation to generation. If we're not open and transparent with ourselves, get whatever help we need, whatever counseling or therapy we need, and really work on ourselves, we're going to do our children a disservice, because
Mhm.
the trauma that we experience is going to, either directly or indirectly impact them. And the cycle just keeps going. And it's unfortunate that it went that way, but it says a lot. I mean, because like you said, even now, and thinking about when your daughter was 16, there's no way in heaven you're going to set them up,
Yeah.
let them
Mhm.
date a 21-year-old, let alone set them up with a 21-year-old.
Yeah,
So
no.
you were
Mhm.
dating him, and it sounds like you were with him for like what, 2 years or so, because you were going through high school, and then when you went to college, you left. So was it like a 2-year, 3-year relationship?
Yeah, it was about 2.5 years, something like that. Yeah.
And the whole time that you were with him, were you still living with your parents, or had you moved out?
No, I was still.
Did you and your mom ever have a relationship to where you felt comfortable communicating any concerns or things that made you uncomfortable with the guy that you were dating?
No, not with anything. Nothing. Because my mother was the type of person that if she could see any vulnerability, or if something was going to be humiliating for me, she would she would embarrass me in front of people. Like trying to think of an example. Like when I was younger, and so of course, I mean, I think that the universe hates me. But I was in grade 4, and I was the first one in my class that started developing. And I didn't even notice, but all the boys in the class did. Um, and then in grade 5, I started my cycle, and my mother hadn't even told me about it. And I didn't know. And here I am, I'm bleeding, and I thought I was dying. And I was terrified. And I remember when my mom, I told her when we had to go and buy my first bra, I said, please don't tell my dad. Because I don't know what I was thinking. I was a kid, right? I just I don't want my dad to know. Um, and at the dinner table that night, that's the first thing she said to my dad was, oh, well, we had to go and buy your daughter a bra today because she's developing. And it made me feel so uncomfortable. And then, of course, same thing when I started my cycle. I didn't want my dad to know. And again, at the supper table, my mom tells my dad all about it, and how, I had walked to school and I bled through my pants and I was all embarrassed. And um yeah, it was things like that all the time. Like even if I left clothes on the floor in my room or whatever, and my mom would tell my boyfriends that, oh, I'm a slob and I leave stuff all over. And like she would take things like that and she would make it way worse all the time. I was afraid to tell her anything, because even when the kids were picking on me at school, and because when you're a kid and your hormones are changing and stuff, I had pimples on my face. And the kids, how kids are, right? So I was a target of that as well. And they were calling me pizza face back then. And so I went home and I was sad. I was crying about it. And my mother asked me what was wrong. And I made the mistake of actually telling her, opening up to her and telling her what they were saying and how it made me feel. And then in one of our arguments or fights, because I didn't get an A on a test and I was just lucky to pass the stupid thing, she would call me names and she'd say, oh, come on, pizza face, why aren't you doing well in school? And stuff like that.
How old was your mom when she had you?
She was turning 30. She was turning 30 when she had me.
That's that generational trauma. Because you said your grandma was so critical of her. And when you don't heal from something, or when something you're carrying burdens inside, it just, in my experience, you end up lashing out on someone who really can't stand up for themselves because you don't have anywhere else for it to go. And you
Makes
haven't
sense.
learned how to manage it in a healthy way yourself. Gosh, I hate that you went through that. So for 2 years, you're in a relationship with a guy who's much older, and his control was really jealousy. What, did he ever really be controlling, or was it mainly just letting you know how much he disliked things that you did that had him insecure?
Um, he was very vocal about what he didn't like. Um, he tried to manipulate situations to have control. And like even with the modeling thing, I remember I was over in Detroit and I was having some of my composite pictures done. And he went with me, he took me. And here we are on 8 Mile Road, and I'm having some of these pictures taken. And I'm just changing outfits, and they did my hair and whatever else. And um, this carload of guys drives by. It was a convertible, and they were yelling out stuff. And Chris thought, oh, well, how dare you, and he started yelling back. And I'm like, do you forget where we are? I think that you should just shut up. Like maybe you should just zip it right now because we don't know what's going on over there in that car. And I feel like, still surviving today. Thank you. Just let them say what they need to say and let's just forget it. Right. It was just stuff like that all the time. Like it was like he was peacocking all the time. So
That's a good way to describe it, peacocking, because baby, them jokers be so proud. Ooh-wee, so proud.
yeah.
So you cut it off, you go to college, you start living for Jen. How is that? How do you feel, like a sense of freedom? Are you still staying at home and commuting to college, or did you stay on campus? What was going on at this point?
I was actually living in Windsor. That's where I was going to school. And I was living with a bunch of roommates from Chatham. And I was the only one going to college. The rest were all in university. And at first it was very different for me because it was my first time living away from home. And so it was a little intimidating at first. I didn't it took me a long time to kind of uh, figure things out, if that makes sense. And I was going through for graphic design, and I had a friend of mine, he was picking me up for school, and things seemed to be going good. And I started dating this guy, and he was a lot older than me again. And he was in university, and I mean, things were good. Things weren't too bad between us, but it became really, I don't know, it was weird. It was like I felt him pulling away, but at that time I didn't know as much as I know now about just even people and the way people think and how men can be, and how sometimes if they feel they're getting a little bit too close and it scares them, they will start to pull away. So back then I just assumed that, well, okay, we're done. Like we're not dating anymore. And I had moved on, and um was just having fun with my friend because I turned 19, and she was in my class, and we were going out to the bar, and it was all a new experience for me. It's all brand new.
So you separate from, it sounds like it was a pretty healthy relationship, though. I mean, you have your good and bad, but it didn't sound like it was anything in that relationship that, as you look back now, that there were any red flags that this guy, something is off with him.
No, he is probably one of the best things for me. It was just maybe the age difference or just lack of knowledge, right? He was like the second person I ever really dated. So I just wasn't I wasn't prepared for a lot of things. And so when he had pulled back, it wasn't that he didn't want to be with me, and I didn't know that. I just thought that he didn't want to be with me. And he actually had pulled back because he was getting really close to me. And it was also starting to interfere, I guess, with his schooling. And um like we were really close though. Like there was some good stuff, and then it just, yeah, it was just confusing. I didn't know what was happening. So I just took it for what it was worth and I just moved on.
So you get out of that relationship. Do you spend any time by yourself, like any significant time at this point? Because you went from 16 to 18 and then 18 to 19 or 19-ish, and now you're 19 or 20. Do you have any time to just kind of discover Jennifer, who she is, what she likes, her interests are, what she wants in another person? Or did you kind of end up in another relationship?
I I ended up in another relationship, and it was a guy I had met at the bar. And I didn't um I didn't even know at the time how I really felt about him, but I had told him that I wanted to take my time to get to know him, and I wasn't the type of person that would just, jump into bed with someone. And I told him straight up right from the start. And he was another one. Very kind of pushy, very jealous. I had guy friends who didn't like that. Um, Whenever we'd go to the bar, he looked more like he was my bodyguard than he was my boyfriend. Um, he literally would follow me to the bathroom and stand outside the bathroom. And if any guy looked my way, and he was a really big guy. Like he was a very big, tall, muscular guy. Like he really looked like he was my bodyguard. And yeah, nobody wanted to mess with him. Um, and it got to the point where he was so jealous of my guy friends, and he knew that I had one night a week that I would have a bunch of my guy friends over. We'd be playing cards, watching hockey, and drinking beer. And he knew that. And I had originally invited him, but he didn't want to come because he didn't want to be around a bunch of guys. And so he was very jealous, and he showed up one night. I had just a few too many beers with my friends, and they left. My roommates weren't there at the time. They were all back here in Chatham. So I was alone in the house. And he knew that. And he came to the house, and the door wasn't shut all the way. So he pushed the door open and he came in. He was really high. Um, and he was kind of accusing me of stuff that wasn't happening. And he basically told me that he thought I was, sleeping with those friends of mine, which I wasn't. And he told me that he was going to, take it. And I asked him to leave, but he wasn't leaving. And yeah, and he did. So that was the first time I was raped. And he wouldn't leave my house. I locked him out of my bedroom. And back then we didn't have cell phones. So I was just sitting in my room all night, scared. And he was sitting out just outside my door. I couldn't get to the phone. So he was just out there the whole time. He ended up falling asleep on the couch. And the next morning, my ride came to get me, and it was another friend of mine. And I told her what had happened, and she took me to the clinic. And they had taken, they did a rape kit on me, and they gave me the day after pill just to make sure. And they took pictures and um, encouraged me to have him charged, but I was I was afraid to. Um, there had been other things that had happened in my life as well, and they didn't go so well through court, so I didn't want to put myself through that again. And after that day, he stalked me for a long time. Um, and I was so scared. I remember one night I called the guy that I had dated before, and I had said to him, I'm really scared. And I told him what happened. And he came over, and he spent a few nights with me just to, I guess, protect me, make sure I was okay. And when I basically ended up in a roundabout way. I failed out of school because of all the stress. And I was getting ready to move back to Chatham, and I didn't shut and lock the door. And he came walking into my house as my friends were sitting there and kind of tried to start a fight. And I just couldn't wait to get back to Chatham, just get away from him.
When everything happened that night and you were locked yourself in, so he didn't try to force himself back into the room. He just sat out there and basically barricaded you in and waited.
Yeah.
All night. Did he
Yeah.
even say anything?
Yes. At first, when it was all over with and he was done, when I stood up, I thought I was bleeding because it was dark and I felt stuff coming down my legs. And just because of just how awful it was and how rough it was. And I really thought I was bleeding. And it wasn't blood. So I was scared because I wasn't on any birth control pill at the time because, I mean, I wasn't really in a relationship. And um, with the other man, we used protection. So um, when I locked him out of my bedroom, he was basically out there in the other room and he was laughing. And he was telling me that uh, he hopes that I'm pregnant because if I'm pregnant, then I have to stay with him. And he was going on and on. None of it made any sense to me at the time. It um, actually really, really scared me because I knew at my age I wasn't ready to have a child. That's not what I want, especially with a guy I didn't even really know. And I didn't know even if he had any diseases or anything. And it was really terrifying for me. But yeah, that was his plan. He actually had come there that night with intent, and he followed through with it. So,
And prior to that, had y'all ever had any sexual relationships
have I?
with him?
No, not with him. No. No, he was the one I kept telling him, I'm not ready yet. Like, I don't really know you. I want to get to know you better. And I don't just jump in like that. And yeah, he didn't want to take no for an answer anymore. So
How long was that time frame from when you first met him? Because I remember you said you met at the bar, and that's you like, I'm not that girl. How long was that time frame from then, first meeting, to that night?
probably about almost 2 months, maybe almost.
Had y'all even considered yourselves in a relationship, or were you still like, hey, we're just dating, getting to know each other, nothing serious?
I was thinking getting to know each other. He was thinking that we were in a relationship and that he basically thought he owned me.
So then your friend comes over the next morning. Does he leave when you leave? Does he leave before you leave? He just stays there?
He was there and I left. I had to sneak out of my own house,
Because he
and
was still asleep.
he was asleep on the couch, and I snuck out. And when I came back home later that day, he was gone. But yeah, I had to sneak out of my own house.
With you choosing not to file a report because of the bad experiences that you've had in the past, but you still had the rape kit done, do they
Mhm.
like reserve that for future references in case something were to happen again, or in case somebody else files a report, they have at the hospital or at the clinic, this is the record of this guy? Or do you know?
I I don't know. I just know that they kept in touch with me to let me know that I did not have AIDS, thank God, or any other diseases that they checked for. So that was scary waiting for that information.
Tormenting.
Mhm.
Oh my gracious, because this is at a time where communication is really slow, or a lot slower than it is today. So what was life like after that? You move back home with your parents,
Yeah.
you get a job. How is that when you return home? Because your mom doesn't seem like she's the most understanding woman in the world. You return back home because you've essentially failed out of school. I imagine you didn't tell her what happened,
No, I didn't.
but what are you dealing with now once you move back in with your parents?
Um, Basically, it was just again like how I was, um, how it always was, except for my mom stopped physically abusing me because I started fighting back. But the mental and the emotional abuse never stopped.
Because at this time, you're what, 20, 21, 22
I
ish?
was around, I was around so I came back home. I was probably going on 20.
Okay. So
And yeah.
you're back home and you go get a job.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're working at this point after everything you've been through up to this point. Are you kind of like, this is it for now? Let me take a break from even entertaining anyone and just focus on me.
No, I still didn't. I got into another relationship, and with a guy who was a nice guy, but he was a huge player.
Mm.
And and he was an alcoholic. So I was always the one driving everybody around because I didn't drink much. And yeah, so that relationship was mm, about 2 years. And I finally broke it off, and he lived in Windsor. I broke it off with him because it was probably about the second time that he had cheated on me. And I was done with that. And then you'd think that I would wait and take time to get to know myself, and I again did not.
So
Um,
before you go into this one, how is your relationship with your father outside of the times when your mom would be abusing you and he would just leave? Did y'all have any kind of positive connection, or did you feel any kind of safety or security or protection from him?
um, my dad and I had an okay relationship, but it wasn't perfect. Um, I never felt safe. I never felt like he protected me. And like there was times where my mom, because especially when she knew I'd fight back, she knew if she I called it poking the bear. So she knew if she freaked out enough and she woke my dad up out of sleep, he'd come downstairs and he'd be like roaring like a bear. And because he would never do anything to her, it always came at me. And there was one time in particular, I remember my dad was woken up by my mom screaming over something so stupid that didn't need to happen. And my boyfriend, that was the cheater, was there with me. And it was over a dog, actually. And I just kept trying to tell her, just like, you don't need to yell right now. Just be quiet. Like, none of this needs to be like this. And so my dad came downstairs and he was upset because he was woken up, and of course my mom's screaming at him, so I'm screaming at her. So I was sitting in the chair and he came at me, and he started choking me out, and my boyfriend at the time didn't know what to do. He was like in shock. And I remember I couldn't breathe, and it made me scared, but it also made me angry. um So I just remember I picked my feet up and I kicked him and pushed my dad way back. And I jumped up out of the chair and I put my fist up and I basically called my dad on. Um, and then I ran out of the house, and my boyfriend chased me, and he just apologized. He was like, I didn't even know what to do. I'm sorry, I didn't even know what to do. So yeah, like my dad, that was the only time really that my dad has done that, or had done that. And it brought on a discussion later when my mother was not around, and I was angry. And I remember saying to my dad that I have never felt supported by him, never felt protected by him, and that I was angry that he even allowed her to push him to the point where he was hurting me as well. And I just remember screaming at him, and I said I hated him, and I left the room. And I felt so bad for saying that. I didn't want to say that I hated him, but it just kind of it came out that way. So I remember I was kind of coming back downstairs to come and apologize. And I remember getting to the bottom step, and I looked into the den, and my dad was laying on the floor. And at first I was afraid because I thought maybe something was really wrong. And he was petting our dog at the time, and he was sobbing. So I didn't know what to do. And I just turned around and walked back upstairs. So that's the first time in my life I had ever seen my dad cry.
And you took that and carried that burden with you. Amongst all of the other burdens that you're carrying at this point, your mother's you're never going to get her approval. Your father has never done anything, and then he does do something, and you respond, and now because it hurt him, you feel like the bad person. You've been
Mm-hmm.
used by other men, and it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that you probably weren't taking time to get to know you is because you were seeking some kind of love that you knew you deserved, but you didn't have in the safety of your
Yeah.
own home.
Yeah. And approval. Yeah.
Love and approval. Boy,
Mm-hmm.
them two will get you every time. They'll get you
Mm-hmm.
every time.
It's true.
So you get out of the relationship with the guy who's cheating on you, and then you go into another relationship.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take before when you met that guy, and then how did that relationship transition?
Well, I had already known him because we all there was a whole group of us that would hang out together, and he was part of that friend group. And he had been bugging me. He wanted to date me, and I finally I gave in. And I agreed, and we started dating. And then I think within a year and a half, almost 2 years of dating, and so about a year into dating, he wanted me to move in with him into his apartment, and I wanted to. So I had gone home and I started packing up a box of my stuff. And my mom came into the bedroom and asked me what I was doing. And I said, I am packing up my stuff and I'm going to move in with. And she told me, no, I was not. And I said, yes, I am. You know, I can choose to. I'm working. I can move out. And so she told me I could leave, but I couldn't take any of my stuff with me. I had to leave all my stuff there and I could only leave with the clothes on my back. And I said, no, these are my clothes and some of my stuff. And I said, I'm taking it with me. It's mine. I'm taking it. And so I was putting stuff in the box and I had it only partially filled. And I remember her grabbing a hold of the other side of the box. And um, as she's screaming at me, we end up playing tug of war with the box. And the box ends up breaking and everything flew everywhere. And she picked up one of my sweaters and she wrapped it around her fist and she punched me in the face with it. So I was upset. I grabbed my stuff and the broken box and I walked out. And I remember when I showed up to the apartment with the broken box, the first thing he said to me was, "You couldn't find a better box?" And I said, "No, it was a good box." Um, and I explained what happened. And yeah, he was kind of, at the time, he was kind of surprised, but kind of not. And I started living with him.
So when he started asking you after the last relationship, he asked you again if you would be in a relationship with him. Does he know any history that you've been through with your parents and these guys and how they've mistreated you at this point?
Yeah, yeah, he knew.
Does he think that you just need to be with me? I can show you what love is for real. I want to treat you the way you deserve to be treated. Was it that kind of energy? Or do you feel like he was preying on all of the damage that you've endured over the course of your life?
Um, I think that in a sense, I think he was I guess preying on me. Uh because he knew that I was damaged and I guess that he just figured it'd be, easy. And I guess it kind of was. And but I didn't really realize I didn't realize what he was actually like. I I never ever could see red flags. So
You probably saw them. It's just knowing that they're what they are, because we see them. But in the moment, if we're not equipped to know what to look for and know what it looks like, we can either make excuses or we can convince ourselves that it's not that bad, or all healthy
mhm.
relationships go through ups and downs. This isn't such and such. And so we find ourselves in situations that we were never meant to be in because sometimes we really just don't know. We just don't know any better. But you said that you guys were dating for a good year or so before you even moved in with him. So how was the year? Were you even attracted to him? Or were you kind of just like, just exhausted, just whatever?
I was exhausted. And at the time, I think I was just done. And I just wanted out of the house. And I guess he was my escape from all of that.
So when you moved out, did I would have I would imagine that your relationship with your mother kind of was really strained at this point because you blatantly did the opposite of what she told you to do and you fought her on it. Did y'all ever reconcile anything, or was it kind of just don't call me if you need me anything because I don't have anything to give?
Um, I mean, I didn't go over there as much. I did, but I didn't because I still had my dog there because we couldn't bring her to the apartment. She was too big. So my dad, because my dad loved her too, my dad was kind of looking after her for me, and I would go over and I would spend time with Misty and take her for walks and stuff like that. But sadly, she couldn't come to the apartment, and we were looking for a house with a yard so we could kind of bring her with us, right? And so a lot of times I was at the house when my mom wasn't really there, especially like right after I left. And I like my mom knew that I was still going to come over and take Misty for walks and take care of her. And I bought the food and I did everything that needed to be done for her. My dad did help a little bit too. And um, so my my mom, just to be, I guess, spiteful or hurtful, um, she decided one day that the boy coming around bringing the newspaper, she decided to give him my dog. And he took her home. And I went over one day and she wasn't there. And I couldn't figure out where she was. And I remember asking my dad, where's Misty? And that's when he told me that my mom had decided to give her away. And I was pretty devastated. Um, I was worried too because she was um, 3/4 pit, 1/4 lab, but she really looked like a pit bull. And she wasn't a bad dog at all. She was a very kind, sweet, loving dog. But it was at a time frame when people were terrified of pit bulls, and they were getting a bad rep. And I remember just worrying that something was going to happen to her, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I remember driving by the house where she was at, and they had her out in the yard. And I could tell that she's visibly um, skinnier. You could see her rib cage, and I was worried. And there was part of me that just wanted to go over there and just steal her back because she was my dog. And I didn't. But then I just had a feeling one day that it was all going to be okay and that she was going to be coming home. And not too long after that, the little boy was made to bring her back home. and my dad took her back, and they said that they were pissed because my mom had lied and told them that she was a lab, and they had found out that she was part pit bull. So instead of doing the right thing, they actually just starved her for a while until they decided it was just better just to bring her back. So she came back home. And from that point, we got a house and I took her. So, and my mom was pissed. She was so pissed that the dog got brought back. Because in a way, it was almost like, just like many times in my life, um, it was her. I don't even know what to call it. I guess purposely trying to hurt me.
Jen, this is a lot. You're what, 24 at this time, at this age? Like during this
I
time?
was 22.
That's a lot happening from 16 to 22.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to I don't want to say anything that's off the wall. It's just really unfortunate that there are parents who, I mean, every child wants to be loved. And that there are parents who intentionally try to do things to hurt their own children. It's just baffling to me. But I know it's because, I mean, you've been through something yourself. It's no excuse, but you've been through something yourself. You haven't managed it. You haven't healed from it. And so naturally it carries on. Wow. So y'all are together for a year. You move in with him, and then y'all get a house. How long after? Like 2 years, 2.5 years later?
It was about 2 years into our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And he had asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And
But how are you feeling? It's because it sounds like you're just existing at this point. You're really just, I'm out of the house. I don't like where I am, but I'm settling because it's better than what I came from.
exactly. Yeah.
And I imagine that your energy was giving off that same feeling. Like, what was his energy towards you while you're sitting here literally suffering for the sake of choosing the lesser evil?
Um, he was kind of always very unemotional. And at the time, I didn't really think too much of it. Um, he didn't like my mom that much, but then again, she really didn't like him either. Um, so he just, he was, I look back and I realized that, I chose him, but I didn't realize what I was choosing at the time. And I accepted a lot of the things from him that I shouldn't have as well, that weren't in line with my own um, morals, I guess you would say,
What
and
kind
what
of
I believe in. Well, he was into, well, I mean, at the time it was like today's standards, it was really, it was nothing. Like he did a lot of weed, and I didn't do drugs, and he liked to drink a lot, and I didn't drink a lot. Um,
what was he like this before y'all got into a relationship? Like when y'all are hanging out as a group of friends, do you see these things in the group setting?
yeah, like
You
a lot of my friends were doing that stuff. I wasn't. And I didn't like it. I didn't accept it. It wasn't something that I agreed with. Um, but he had promised me that once we got married, he was going to quit. And I was naive enough to believe it.
So y'all get married. Do y'all have a wedding ceremony or was it a courthouse?
It was a wedding ceremony, and it was the biggest show of my life. I hate to say it. Well, I mean, it was probably not the biggest, but it was one of the biggest because everything that could go wrong did. And now knowing what I know and understanding things now, um, again, like I believe a lot in the universe and energy and stuff like that. And I do see now that it was probably basically the universe saying to me, no, wake up. This is not your person. What are you doing? We're going to still make everything so difficult and everything's going to go wrong. And maybe you're going to get a clue. And I didn't because I wasn't aware then like I am now, or more and more becoming aware now.
So
So
even with your lack of awareness at that age, you already know you don't really care. Like you're just there. Why did you marry him?
honestly, I think it was because my mother didn't like him. And I
Why?
cared about him. I just didn't, I don't think I was ever really in love with him, but I cared about him. So,
So y'all get married.
yeah. Well, the night before my wedding, after the uh, horrible time trying to put it together, it's supposed to be the most happiest time of your life, and it was awful. And I remember the rest of my bridesmaids are all sleeping. And my friend Leslie says to me in the middle of the night, because she was awake, she says, "Do you really want to marry him?" And I said, "No." And she's like, "Okay, well, let's get the hell out of here. Let's just go. Let's go." And I'm like, "I can't. It's too late now. Everything's finally set and everything's ready to go. And I can't let my grandparents down. And I didn't want to have a big problem with my mother. And I figured if I walked away from my uh, husband to be, where else was I going to really end up? Is probably back at home where I didn't want to be. So I married him anyway."
That's a hard decision to make. Was
Yeah.
hope there though? Was there hope that okay, he already said if we get married, I'll stop doing the drugs, I'll stop drinking. Besides that, did you have hope that maybe something would shift in yourself even and say maybe I'll eventually, I'll eventually fall in love with him or
Yeah. It was all of that. I was hoping that he would follow through on what he promised. And I was hoping that eventually I would love him and that we could have a good life together. And and
that,
it didn't.
what did happen? So y'all get married. The next day you go back home. Do y'all go on a honeymoon?
Kind of a honeymoon. I mean, we didn't go anywhere nice or warm or anything like that, which would have been wonderful, but we just didn't have the money, so we just stayed here in Canada and we went to Niagara Falls for a couple of days, and then we came back home, and life went on. And I think probably within the first week of being married, um, there's so many bombs dropped that I wasn't really prepared for. And the first one was like, you really don't even know who you're actually with. Sometimes you don't. Like, you think you know somebody, but you have to question how much do you really know them? And I found out that who I married uh, wasn't really who I thought I was marrying. I had come to find out from his family, who waited till after we're married to tell me that like he had been in jail a few times. One of the last times he was actually in prison. Nobody ever told me why, what he did.
Did you ever ask?
Um, he would have just lied. There, he lied about everything all the time. Um, he uh, he actually didn't even have a license, so he had been driving all that time without a license. I
How
didn't know.
getting alcohol? You have to have an ID to get alcohol, right? In Canada too, right?
Um, back then it was easier. It was easier. Even for me to even at 16 get into a bar, it was a lot easier. Now, good luck. So just not happening, which is probably a good thing. But back then it was really easy, sadly.
So you find out that he's been arrested a couple of times. You don't know why.
Yeah.
What other bombs did you get the first week of being married?
Well, that was one. Um, Also that he was actually driving without a license. Um, and so I started driving him to work, and then I would drop him off and then I would go to work. And he had promised that he wasn't going to smoke weed anymore and he was going to get on the straight and narrow, and I believed him. And I just remember the one day I dropped him off at work and I was on my way to work, and something told me to go back. So I went back to his work and I couldn't find him. I was like, I know I just dropped you off here. Where the heck are you? And as I kind of walked around the building looking for him, I opened one of the doors and I found him in this room and he was smoking weed. So I
At
got,
work on the clock.
and so I got in the car and I drove off to work. And later on that day, I came home expecting, because I had been working, I used to work in home care, and I would have a really long day. Sometimes I would not get home until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I would leave food with instructions on how to cook it and what to make out for him. And um, that particular night, I came home, and instead of having supper made, I walk in and he's got a bunch of our friends at the house, and they're all uh, really high, and they had all been drinking. And the house was just filled with smoke because they were using our brand new knives that we got for, one of our wedding gifts, hot knifing oil on the stove. And I guess he just figured, you know what? I guess I'm caught, so I might as well just do it all. So came home and I was upset. I was hurt. And I just went to bed. Figured why address it, right? And then life just went on from there, and he just did what he did, and I just kind of felt numb for a very long time.
So how long were y'all married?
18 years married, 20 years together. And I finally, after many abusive moments, lots of lies, losing stuff because of drugs, which he ended up into cocaine at one point too. Lost everything and had left a couple times before that and got talked into going back home. And I went
Right.
back. Just him and his promises, I'll change, and I'll get better, and I promise I'll work on it. And I just wanted our family to be a family. And so I kept going back. And we just ended up always kind of back together again. And he would change for a little bit, and then he would end up being uh, basically back to the same way within a few months. I never could really change. He never really tried. At one point in our marriage, because of the cocaine habits, we lost our house, we lost our car. He had hidden it from me. He lied about it so many times. He even stole from my mom's credit card, paying for the habit. Our mortgage payments went to pay for his habit. Um, he ended up getting arrested, and he was put in jail. And I went to the courthouse every day for a week until I could find someone who could help me, because I felt it was my responsibility to get him out and get him help. And I went to court finally the day that he was, whatever, going to get his sentence or whatever was going to happen. And he spoke to the judge, and the judge said, I will release him to you, but it was my responsibility to make sure that he went to all of his probation. He went to his counseling. And I had to make sure that he was not to touch any more drugs or he would be back in jail. So at the time, I was trying to work 3 jobs to pay for stuff so we didn't lose any more. And
So he wasn't working?
no, he ended up losing his job too because of his drugs. And he had lied to me about that as well, because I had been dropping him off at his job that he was apprenticing to be a diesel mechanic. And all of a sudden one day I get a phone call from the variety store that was right next door. And it was this woman in there that I didn't prefer. And she had called me to tell me that I needed to come and take my husband to the hospital. And I'm like, okay, why? What's going on? And she says he's acting weird and you need to come get him. And I'm like, why do you know he's acting weird? Like, and she says, well, because he works here. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. He works at like across the road, whatever. And she says, no, he doesn't. So I was confused, and she said, oh, he's acting weird. And right now he's out in a dumpster in the back of the parking lot. And I thought, what? So I drove out there and I walked out to the dumpster and I opened the little door that's on the side, and sure enough, he was in there. He was digging through the garbage, and he picked up some stuff that had pink lipstick on it, and he's like, this is yours, isn't it? You're cheating on me. And it was crazy. It was wild. I was like, you realize where we are, right? We're not at home. We're at the truck stop. And that's disgusting. And it's probably obviously somebody else's because it's not mine. And he couldn't even comprehend, because this is the day I found out, because I went over to his old employer and I walked in and he was happy to see me. And I said to him, like, so what's going on? And I said, he doesn't work here. And he looked at me and he says, oh, you didn't know? And I'm like, no, I've been dropping him off here every single day. And he told me, he says, well, he hasn't worked here for about 3 months. Yeah, I had no idea. And he told me that he had to let him go because he was becoming too much of a risk because of what he was doing. And he didn't need him working on big trucks. Hi. And I was confused. And a couple of the other guys that he had worked with came out and said, yeah, he's doing coke. And that's how I found out. And he had called the cops because Tony was acting weird. And the police showed up with the dogs. And I don't know, I guess he knew they were coming, or he saw them coming and he snuck away. And yeah, they went looking for him. They found him and he had some coke on him. And so they put him into jail. And then it went from there. And I was beside myself. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do.
How far into the marriage are you at this point? 'Cause, I mean, 18 years is a long time. And the whole time I was thinking, okay, she's going to marry this guy. It's not going to be long. Then you say 18 years, and that's a long time to be existing under anybody's thumb. But you also mentioned you got the abuse of drugs. And then you mentioned that there was some abuse in there as well. So starting with the drugs, how long had you guys been married that this whole truck stop situation happened?
I think 6 or 7 years. And he always lied. He hid stuff from me all of the time. I never knew what was going on.
When you look back on it now and you learned about the drugs, was the abusive part happening before you learned about the drugs, or did it kind of start happening after that day at the truck stop?
It got worse after.
When did he start abusing you?
Well, he was always kind of like that. Like I ended up very sick in our marriage when I finally was able, because originally I was told I would never have children because I have PCOS and I also have uh endometriosis. And I was really, really sick and they told me I'd never have children. So I was on a path to wellness and seeing a naturopath, and he kind of turned things around for me so I could have a baby. And so when I had my daughter, um, everything kind of just went wrong. It was another one of those moments where um, should be the happiest moment of your life, and it's robbed from you just by stupid mistakes. And long story short, my doctor was not informed that I was in labor because the nurse pretty much told me I was stupid. It was my first child, and what the hell did I know? And that I wasn't in labor, and she stuffed me in a room by myself in the hospital and sent my husband home. And the whole time I was in labor, I just don't experience pain like other people do. And she didn't believe that I was in labor. So by morning time,
Check you?
pardon?
She didn't check you?
No.
How can you just look at someone and say, you know, you're not in labor, and you don't, as a physician or nurse, check?
She was the head nurse on the floor that night, and she didn't check. She just basically told me I was crazy and put me in a room by myself and sent me home. And so I remember pacing the room that night, um, feeling what I was feeling and just dealing with it. And somehow I was so tired, even in pain, I was so tired. I fell asleep. And the next morning, a different nurse came in and she woke me up. And she says, "Oh, I'm gonna take you down to the birthing room now, and I'm just gonna check you." And she pulled the sheets back and she says, "Did you know you're bleeding?" I had no idea I was bleeding or why. I did not know. And so she walked me down to the birthing room. And I think on the way down to the birthing room, I must have dilated pretty much the rest of the way. And I remember laying on the bed, and she said, "Did you want to have an epidural?" And I was thinking at the time, "Wow, I guess I better. Like everybody else seems to be doing that, so sure, maybe I'll do that." And so she said, "Okay, so I'm going to put an IV in, and then I'm going to call someone for the epidural, and then I'm going to call your husband, and I'm going to call your mom, and I'm going to call the doctor." I was like, "Okay." And so she put the IV in, and I remember she did it wrong. So I remember it blowing off the end, and I watched the blood just kind of squirt out, and I was just kind of just staring at it like nothing. And she finally got it all straightened out, and she left. And I was in there by myself. And she told me that it was the change of shift and that the other nurses would be in soon.
Jennifer,
And
what year is this?
that would have been in 2000, and patients was born 2006.
In 2006, you go to a hospital and you're like, "Hey, I think I'm in labor." The first nurse says, "No, you're not. Send your husband home. And
Mhm.
even though you're not in labor, I'm still going to put you in a room instead of sending you back home." You wake up, the second nurse says you're bleeding, and there's no urgency to say, like, you're pregnant. We need to check and see why you're bleeding right now.
Yeah.
So they walk, when you say she walks you, are you walking the whole way? Or are you in a wheelchair?
Yeah, I walked.
So you're bleeding and you're walking through the hospital bleeding
Mhm.
to another room where they put you in the room, and she asks if you, before even checking to see if you've dilated or asked you about your contractions, she's asking if you want an epidural.
Yeah. Because they didn't think I was in labor. They thought that I guess there was time. Um,
2006.
yeah,
This ain't 1937.
right.
You check. It doesn't matter if you think it's time or not. You don't just blindly give somebody an epidural.
Yeah.
So, okay. So frustrating for me. I can't even imagine.
Oh yeah, it was not a good time. And yeah, no, it was not good. And I remember as I'm laying there and I'm by myself, there was this tiny little lip at the end of the bed. And I remember feeling this kind of like a rolling sensation and a lot of pressure. And every time I would have it, I would just kind of stick my feet out and I would kind of press against that little lip. And then when it would stop, I would just kind of release my feet and then I would just push them out again and breathe through it. And the two nurses came in because it was New Year's Eve that night, and they were talking about what fun they were going to have and just the amazing time that they had planned for New Year's Eve. And they didn't even really introduce themselves. And I'm sitting there and I'm just kind of having these feelings of this rolling sensation and this pressure. And finally I had to interrupt them. And I'm like, excuse me, I think I have to go to the bathroom. And they both looked at me and they're like, which one? And I'm like, number two. And they're like, oh, hold on a second. So I come over and they check me. And I just remember the girl's eyes getting really wide. And she's like, oh my God, you got to hold it in. You got to hold it in. And I'm like, okay. And she says, you got to hold it in. There's no birthing nurse right now. And your doctor's not here. So That was at 7 o'clock. And I just kept breathing through it, holding, holding her in, pushing my feet at the end of the bed. And I remember my husband comes in and these nurses are running around like crazy trying to get this, and they're dropping stuff and they're, getting stuff all ready. And he walked in holding his coffee, not prepared, and he's watching them, and he looked at me and he looked at them, and he's like, uh, is everything okay? And they're like, um, she's ready. And he just was like, what, she is? Oh, okay. And he sat beside me and he's looking at me, and I'm not screaming. I'm nothing. I just looked at him. I said, hi, honey. And I just kept pushing my feet down and breathing. And he was like, are you sure you're ready? And they were like, oh yeah, no, the head's right there. We could see it. And there's a lady down the hallway just screaming bloody murder. So he's looking at me and he's hearing her, and he's just sipping his coffee. He doesn't even know what to do at this point. And I remember my doctor walked into the room, and she kind of looked at me, and she was not prepared. And she just said, well, I just got to get my little gown on and whatever. And I looked at her and I said, can I push now? And she says, okay, well, if you feel the need to. And I did 2 pushes, and she had to run over and catch her without even really having her gown on. And she was in shock. I think everybody was in shock. And then my mom showed up after she was already born. And and then that wasn't even really the worst part. The worst part happened next. Because I tore a little bit, and my doctor was not, I guess, not quite awake. She wasn't prepared for any of what just happened. And she thought that she would stitch me up. And when she was stitching me up, she went in too far with the needle, and she hooked into, well, basically went through the vagina into the rectum, and she tore a chunk out. And I felt it. I felt the pain at the time. I knew something had happened, and she didn't stop to check. She just said, well, you can't feel that. You're numb. And I said, no, I felt that. And
Wait
she
a
just kind of,
second, Jen. Like, what is the communication here? I don't. How do you call the doctor and not tell her, by the way, your patient is in active labor and we can see the head? Because there's no reason for her to walk in not prepared and to not know that you haven't had an epidural.
I haven't had anything. I was given birth with nothing. They didn't even make it in for the epidural yet, because nobody believed that I was actually even in labor.
And her response is, you can't feel that? Ma'am, are you even watching what you're doing, whether I feel it or not?
No, and honestly, that day changed my life. And I knew that there was something major that had happened. Something was wrong. And I remember having some really horrible things happen to me, and nobody would listen to me. And
While
let's just
you're at the
say,
hospital or after
well,
you got home?
the hospital, like anybody, it just, nobody would listen. Like, they wouldn't listen. They didn't believe that there was something, and I knew something bad had happened to me, and nobody was listening. Um, Sadly, embarrassingly enough, I have this brand new baby, and I remember the doctor told me, because after, you give birth, sometimes you get backed up, and she told me to take a bunch of big laxatives to kind of help, and how we discovered how serious it was when I didn't make it to the bathroom, and it wasn't because of a normal situation. It was all coming out through my vagina. And I went to the hospital because it was burning. It was painful. Nobody believed me when I'm sitting right there telling them, like, this is what happened. This is what's happening now. And there was a lot of whispering going on. And when they took me to the back, I remember 2 different nurses coming over to me, asking me and re-asking me. And I was getting frustrated because I'm like, do you not listen? I already told you this is what happened. And this is why I'm here. And I'm in so much pain. And I just want you to help me. And I remember the doctor came over to me and he didn't believe me either. He asked me again. I had to repeat myself again. And he really truly didn't believe me. And then when he pulled back my gown, he just kind of stood back and he went like this. And he's like, like, what? And he says, well, I don't know why you came here. I don't know what you want me to do for you. And I said, it's a hospital. I need your help. And he said, and he believed me because he said, yeah, I can see it seeping out right now. And he sent me home. They sent me home with nothing. And they told me that I had to go see my doctor who did this and see if she could send me to someone who could fix it. And so, me having a healthcare background, I went home and I had to try to figure out some way to help myself. So this kind of like is like a little, I guess, like a douchebag, I called it, where you had like the little hose that went down, you filled it with water, and it was for your stitches after having a baby. And what I did was I would fill it and I stuffed the hose inside. And I would just constantly throughout the day have to clean myself out because it was burning, it was painful. Um, and I was having a really hard time being a brand new mom because it was awful, it was painful. And I was eventually sent to a gynecologist, and she had sent me to him and tried to tell him that it was an accident during birth. And then I told him the story and he looked inside and he said to me, that is not an accident from birth. That was a doctor's mistake. And he called all across Ontario to try to find someone who could try to fix me. And Patience was born December 31st, 2006. And I actually didn't meet a surgeon until I think May that year. And they he was from London. He was the only one that would even meet with me. Nowhere else would. And I went to him and he looked inside and he said, to be honest, I've never done this before. He was a gynecologist, but he worked in oncology, so like cancer, stuff like that. And he said, this is something that I've never done. He says, so I want you to be okay. And he says, and I want to fix this for you. And he says, I'm going to sit down with a panel of doctors and I'm going to try to come up with a game plan so we can try to fix this for you so you no longer have to suffer. And he said to me, he's like, I'm actually surprised that you don't have more blisters in there. And he says, and I'm really happy that you didn't end up with sepsis. And he asked me, like, have I been doing something? And I told him that I was using the the little bag that you fill with water you use on your stitches, and I was putting the water inside and cleaning it out constantly. And he said, well, he says, that was the smartest thing you could have done, because you not only probably saved your own life, but you saved yourself from being like really bad in there. He says it's still bad. Like, he had to put me on some really strong antibiotics and things like that before surgery, because it was still bad enough. And he said to me, he's like, so he basically sent me away. He came out with a game plan, and they had me come in July to have the surgery done.
It took
And
an additional 2 more months after
they
he
had,
came up with the game plan.
yeah, they had to come up with this is a big panel of doctors, I guess, and they had to come up with uh, some sort of plan for it. Um, and so he thought that he felt confident enough to try to fix this. And so I went in, and they took me in for surgery, and it ended up being longer than it was supposed to be. And my family was waiting. And one thing I do remember from the surgery itself is I remember waking up. And I remember waking up to the sound of these machines and bells and things going off all around me. And I remember, it was blurry, but I remember seeing a nurse, her face, and she was leaning over me. And I remember her saying to me, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." And the last thing I remembered was her yelling for my doctor. And that was the last thing I remembered. And I woke up the next day. And apparently, I had gone into shock and um, almost died.
Not to be insensitive or anything,
Mhm.
but this sounds like a whole lawsuit.
Not in Canada, it's not. Yeah. I it ended up being a huge nightmare. I used a lot of my savings. I ended up very sick, and they were worried that the surgery wasn't going to work out, all the work that he had done. So I ended up having to be rushed in for emergency surgery and having a colostomy at the time. And that's where I hit my rock bottom. I became depressed, and the body dysmorphia that I already had became worse. I gained a lot of weight again and became really sick. And I remember searching for a lawyer to help me. And every single lawyer I went to turned me down, and with no explanation. And I remember I finally found a lawyer in Windsor, and I went to him, and we talked about what happened. And he was the first one to tell me, he says, "Now, if this just happened just over the river in Detroit," he said, "I could make you about $2 million richer today." He says, "But because this happened in Canada, you can't sue a doctor here. They have to either leave something obvious inside you, cut off the wrong or cut out the wrong something, or kill you before you can sue a doctor. Our government protects them here."
That's 7 months of neglect. due to a single person, well, a group of people. Everyone in that hospital neglected you that day.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a new baby and you're having to deal with 7 months of not getting help that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Where's your husband in all of this?
He was trying to be supportive, but he was struggling because he couldn't understand what was really going on. And he had to try to do a little bit more than he was prepared to do. And he just plain wasn't prepared for that. I guess nobody really was. Um, and when I got the colostomy and I was having a hard time dealing with it, I couldn't look at it. I had done this work with people before, I worked in healthcare, but when it came to my own body, it was like, I couldn't even accept it. I couldn't look at it. I couldn't accept it. It just felt like it wasn't real. And they had sent me home from the hospital and they forgot to give me supplies. And I remember we had to call a nurse when we got home. So she was supposed to bring me supplies and she was supposed to change it for me. And because we got home and it was like 9 o'clock at night, she refused to come. And the problem at the time was that the phalange and everything, some stuff was leaking underneath and it burned my skin and I started to bleed and it wasn't sticking and it came off and I had nothing. And um, I was in the shower trying to wash myself off and it was bleeding and I was trying not to look at it either because I couldn't handle it. And this nurse is on the phone and my husband brought me the phone as I'm in the shower and she's telling me that she's not going to come out and that somehow I was supposed to have my husband help me in some way. And I'm like, he can't help me. He has no background in any of this and he can't handle it. And besides, I really didn't want him touching me. I didn't even want him looking at that, right? And so we ended up calling my mother and my mother was pissed and she called the company. And let's just say that that lady, the nurse who was refusing to come, ended up coming. And she actually called me a whiner. And she gave me crap and said that, well, you better get used to it because you're just going to have to learn how to take care of this yourself at some point. And then she left us with supplies and she put it on and then she left and that was it. And there was many more things along the way, many more surgeries along the way. Um, yeah.
How are you now?
I'll never be the same. Um, but I don't have colostomy. And I do the best that I can. And life's never going to be perfect. Um, I have 2 children now, though, even though it was against the doctor's wishes. But I didn't want my daughter to be an only child like I was, because it was a very lonely world. Um, so even though I was not in the best of places, I was determined I was going to have another child. And so my doctor, who had fixed everything, plus another doctor who did the colostomy for me, they set me up with another doctor in the same hospital who was actually the first doctor's wife. And I had to have a C-section, and she did the C-section. And he was so concerned, they both were, about something going wrong, that they were actually both in the room with the other doctor when my daughter was born, just to make sure that if something went wrong, they were there. And yeah, it actually, the birth of her with the C-section went okay, and she was, fairly healthy. And the one thing about that whole experience, even though it was it was difficult, and I had to have many surgeries in there. Every time I woke up, even though it wasn't the original doctor, it wasn't Dr. Sugimoto, that was his name, the one that fixed the problem. Other doctors would do other stuff. And I would wake up in my room, staying in the hospital, and I'd look over, and a lot of times he would either be standing there waiting for me to wake up, or the one day I woke up and he was asleep in the chair in my room, waiting for me to wake up, checking on me. I think there needs to be more doctors like him.
I don't know what's worse, and maybe it's equally as bad. Everything that you went through, the delayed help, the constant neglect and disregard for you trying to advocate for yourself, or the fact that you can't, there's no evidence or proof of the hospital's responsibility in all of this for other patients or future patients to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I am so sorry that you had to deal with that.
Thank you.
How far apart are your girls?
4.5 years.
So when your second daughter is born, how far along are y'all in the marriage at this point?
13 years. Approximately. Wait, no, sorry, 11. She's born in 2011. So yeah, 11.
11 years. And before she was born, was there any sign of abuse before she was born? Because I can't even imagine there being abuse during everything that you just went through and what you were dealing with for those 4 years.
The abuse was more somewhat psychological, but it became like him still lying, and him still doing drugs, and him hiding stuff and not being responsible. And even when I was in the hospital and I'd be in there for a while, like I had insurance to pay, and pay so much a day. So when I came home, I actually had some money, because I couldn't work. I would try it. I'd work part-time. I'd try to do different jobs. It just wasn't working out. It was very difficult for me. Um, and he would screw up. He'd be out using payday loan places, taking out loans. And um, I would come home from the hospital, and pretty much any money that I got paid from the insurance for being in the hospital, he already had it gone from being irresponsible. And then there'd be times where I'd be at home and healing from surgeries, or just even trying to take care of our kids. And I would want to go out for lunch with a friend, and he would tell me that I couldn't go, that we had food at home and I didn't need to go. A lot. It was okay for him to use the money for drugs and stupid stuff and whatever, but I wasn't allowed to go out with my friends.
And you lived like that for 7 more years.
Yeah, until it got progressively like worse and worse and worse. And I had gone through a lot. I will tell you, a lot. Um, in the midst of all of this. And I think my youngest daughter, Ashlyn, was just about to turn 1. And my dad had passed away in March that year. And her birthday's May 20th. And I thought I was coping. I wasn't really coping very well. And I was pushing myself really hard because I really wanted to be healthy and lose weight and feel good again and like myself. And I was going to boot camp and I was really pushing hard. And I think the stress from my dad, the stress because Ashland was a colic baby. She just never stopped crying. And me pushing really hard. At the age of 35, I ended up having a heart attack. And I was in the hospital. And again, it just must be the area. But because I was 35, I knew what a heart attack looked like. I never knew what it felt like, but I knew what to look for because being in the healthcare industry, right? And I knew what was happening to me was pretty much what I had read about. And so my mom took me to the hospital and we were carrying my baby and my youngest in tow. And when I went in there, the nurse did the right thing. She gave me the right meds just in case, but she did not believe me. And she told me I was wasting everybody's time and that I was basically full of crap. And they did an EKG and it came back normal. But the doctor that was on that day was really wise. And I'm really grateful for him because he knew by my symptoms I described that something just didn't make sense. So he had taken blood work and then he waited for another, I think it was 6 hours, and he took it again. And when he took it again, it came back and it showed in the blood that I had had a heart attack. And so I ended up in the hospital again for a week. And they sent me for an angiogram. And it came back that my heart and everything was clear. So they couldn't figure out why or how I had this heart attack. And it took many years after that. Like, it was left basically as a heart attack, but they didn't know why or how. And it wasn't until quite a few years later, like probably about 7 years later, I saw another doctor and he had an answer. And he told me that it was because at the time I was sick and I was under so much stress that I had an aortic spasm. And it was just enough that stopped blood flow just for a moment that it triggered the same symptoms as a heart attack, but it left no damage.
Is this the same hospital you were giving birth in?
Yeah.
Is this the only hospital?
Basically here, yeah. Yeah.
That's not fair. It sounds so trivial, but that's not fair that I don't believe that you're the only person who has experienced such severe neglect and disregard and disrespect going there, and then to have the government say there's nothing you as the patient can do. It's almost like, well, we know that the patient can't do anything. We're not going to intentionally neglect, but we're not going to give the best care. We're not going to have the conversations and test based off of what the patient is telling us.
Right.
Kennedy, y'all need to get y'all's hospitals together. Y'all need to get not your hospitals, but your nurses and your doctors together. Because no one should have to go through that. No one should have to go somewhere where they expect to receive care and they get what you got.
Exactly. They shouldn't. And that's why, our medical care might be covered here, but it's not the same.
That's insane. That's insane. So your husband just never gets back on track. You're
No.
with that crap until you decide to leave after 18 years. Did he ever get physically abusive, or was it always the manipulation and the...
A couple of times near the end of our relationship, but mostly it was always what I had come to find out later was that he was a narcissist, and it all makes sense now. But everything was always about him. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about our kids. Never was. And I don't think he would ever change. He was really good at gaslighting and trying to make me feel bad for things that were just not in my control. And I put up with a lot of stuff. I even found out that he had slept with one of my friends before we got married. And just a lot of lies started coming out. A lot of hurts were coming out more and more and more. And I just had enough. He did some really dirty stuff in the end that really just was the last for me. I was just, I'm done. Like, just the constant lies, like losing 3 houses, a car. He could never pay rent properly, although he was very unreliable. He was very irresponsible. I would have been better at paying our stuff for us, but he never let me have any control because he always had to have the control. And just lies. So many lies, so much deceit, so much hurt. I'm a very spiteful person. And I just finally said, you know what? I don't give a crap. I don't care what the other side of this looks like. If it's struggle, at least it's struggle that I can finally control on my own rather than struggle along with him and keep living like that, which most of the time I didn't know what the next day was going to hold. Are we going to have hydro? Or are we going to have water? Are we going to have heat? Am I going to lose another vehicle? What else am I going to lose? And so at the end of my marriage, I walked away with nothing, just my daughters and me and our animals. And I got into low income housing because that's all I could do. And that was because of the women's shelter. They helped me because of the abuse. And they helped us get a place. And then I went back to school and I studied for 2 years. I worked really hard to become a massage therapist. And here we are. We're sadly still in low income housing, but I mean, I'm glad that we have somewhere to be. It's not ideal. It's not where I thought I would be at my age. But we're managing. I have gone through lots of counseling. I'm still working on things myself. I'm still trying to overcome a lot of things myself. I went back and I became a life coach as well. So I'm going to be starting to do that. I a couple years ago now, back in 2023, I started in another relationship. And I was very blind to what love bombing was. I didn't realize. I thought he was the most amazing man I could have ever asked for. Just everything, the whole package. Loving, caring, wanted to step up to the plate and actually be a stepdad, and because their father's useless. And I was hopeful. And I thought, wow, how could I get so lucky? And he moved himself into my house. And apparently he had,
About it? Did y'all have a conversation about that?
yeah, he just kind of moved in and brought his stuff over. And then I ended up having to move my room around and make some changes because I really didn't have room for his stuff. And it just kind of went from there. And then he went out and he bought an engagement ring, and he had plans to ask me to marry him, and he had all these plans with my friends. And he had a friend of mine that was going to set up this great big thing. And I really didn't know, I didn't know anything about that. Um, and everything seemed to be good until he decided that he all of a sudden didn't like me doing massage. He didn't like me touching men. He didn't like that I had guy friends, so he started pushing people out of my life. He actually destroyed my friendship with my best friend, Brenda, and we still aren't speaking to this day. He started screaming in my face all the time, accusing me of doing stuff with my clients that I would never in a million years do. And I found myself walking on eggshells every single day, trying to keep the peace, trying to not stir the pot. I was trying to secretively, which was so stupid because I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just trying to do my job and trying to make money, trying to keep things afloat. And I found myself hiding the fact that I was even doing my job. And I had to work my clients around all his breaks, because if I didn't answer the phone, I knew it was going to be a huge fight. And just a lot. This is where I think that he was probably the worst narcissist I've ever been with. Absolutely true narcissism. The gaslighting, the hurt, the it was bad. It was like I was healing when I met him, and he broke me down to the point where I'm now at I'm kind of at ground zero again. And I'm working on it, but I'm still there because it took, when he walked out, because in 2024, my dog that I had for 17 years, who meant so much to me, he passed away in my arms a few days before my birthday. And I was devastated. And he couldn't figure out why. It's just a dog. It's like, to me, no, that dog was my baby. And he had he was going to ask me to marry him on my birthday, which was February 14th. And I was so depressed still because of losing my dog. He told my friend just to hold off on setting everything up, and he canceled everything for my birthday. And we ended up having a big fight because I wasn't meeting his needs because I was too depressed. And he just up. And on February 19th, and he packed his stuff and he walked out when I was already down and distraught and just trying to already overcome the fact that, this dog, this little, to me, he was like a little person. Um, and I was so used to having him with me, and now he's gone. And I was trying to come to terms with that. And then he walked out on me too. And then he told all of his family and that I had kicked him out, which wasn't true. And then he argued with me, saying that it's the same thing because I didn't stop him from leaving. And I kept telling him, well, at our age, I shouldn't have to chase you. I shouldn't have to make you stay if you don't want to stay. Like, you should just want to be here, and you should just want to support me through this, and he couldn't understand it. And then from that time on, even though he didn't live here, he came into my house every single day in the morning, would walk into my bedroom and, kiss me and say he's on his way to work and touch me. And then he'd walk out, and then he'd just show up whenever he wanted. And then he would stalk my house. He would harass me. Just walked in anytime he felt like it, did whatever he wanted to do. Said basically a few times was kind of assaulted me, I guess, sexually assaulted me. But it was confusing to me because I thought in my head that maybe because he had said he was going to get help and he was going to change and things were going to be better and he would act really good and he'd be sweet, and then he'd turn around and he would be a total nightmare. And then he would be talking to other women, yet I wasn't allowed to talk to other men. And that went on for until February this year. And I
So an
finally,
entire year of that?
every day, and harassing every day. And I still had to answer all his calls or it would be a fight. And it was literally, it was making me sick. I was living in fight or flight to the point where in the morning, my body would already feel him coming before he even entered my bedroom. And I would hear a car pull into the driveway, even if I was just sitting here on the couch watching a show or something. And I would immediately be like on guard because I know he's coming. And it was like constantly living in an uproar and being very confused because there was a part of me that still loved him and really wanted things to be okay. And I wanted him to be better. I wanted him to be the man that I first met when he first walked into my life and did all these amazing things. And then there was another part of me that was living in constant fear of his reaction and how he would just blow up. He was scary when he would blow up. And I was always trying not to piss him off, always. And he actually at one point had me so stressed out, he put me in the hospital because they thought I was going to have a stroke because my blood pressure was so high. It was just from the constant fear and never knowing if, like, is he going to come in? Is he going to hit me? Is he going to, what's he going to do? And so some of my guy friends said just recently, enough of that crap. That's it. And they came over and they changed my locks on my door. They put a camera up on my porch. And they were making sure that that was it. He was not coming in here anymore. And he still came here for a week. He showed up on my camera, trying to get into my house. Pissed off that he couldn't get in. And on my camera, you could see it was taping him, and he would be driving by my house. And it all finally stopped. The last day was on my birthday, so February 14th this year was the last day that he finally stopped.
You have endured multiple lifetimes of trauma, but you're still here.
Mm-hmm.
You're still standing. You're still
Mm-hmm.
pushing forward. What advice would you give to anyone, your younger self? I can say that, but anyone who's listening right now who doesn't quite recognize the signs, who doesn't maybe know how to get out from everything that you've experienced from your mother up until this last guy? What do you feel like is the best advice you can give?
Mine is, love yourself enough to know yourself and know that you're worth more and that you deserve more. And don't accept bad behaviors from other people. And don't make excuses for it, because it's not okay. And you don't deserve it. No matter what, you don't deserve it. And if your gut tells you that it's wrong, if you feel off at all, just listen to it.
I think that's some exceptional advice. We have to change our perception of ourselves. We're already valuable, even if we don't know what it is. We have to learn that we are important. There's according to the American Psychology Association, they say that self-worth is when you evaluate yourself and you determine if you are a valuable, capable human being deserving of respect and consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us determine like our self-worth is low because we either don't think we're valuable, we don't think we're capable, we don't think we deserve respect from other people or at least consideration. And that's something that we can always strive to work towards and work on. Evaluating and coming to the realization that regardless of whatever you've been through, regardless of the environment that you were raised in, regardless of all the bad decisions and failures that you've had over the course of your life, we're all living this life for the first time. This life right here, whether you believe in any other lives or not, the life that we're living right now is for the first time. And we have to have grace with all of the decisions that we made. And one thing, I can't remember whose quote this is, but they said you may not make all of the right decisions, but you can make your decisions right. And in order to do that, you have to first start with acknowledging that you're valuable, accepting that you're valuable, acting like you're valuable, demanding that you respect yourself, and other people will fall in line. And so I just wanted to leave with that because I just wanted to piggyback off of what you said. You are worthy, you're deserving of all good things, and you got to know your worth. You have to know your value, and you have to know that other people's trauma is not your burden to bear. It's just not. Jennifer, yeah, I told y'all I didn't know how this ride was going to be, but I said, please keep all hands, arms, legs, and heads inside the vehicle at all times because this one was bananas in pajamas. But I want to say thank you. Not only because you're literally a month out, barely a month out of that last experience, But thank you for sharing your resilience, for choosing to show up, for choosing to share your light with us, your experiences with us, to be courageous and vulnerable and transparent, because there are a lot of things that people have dealt with that they're afraid to talk about because they don't feel like they have someone to talk to, or they don't feel like their feelings are valid, or they don't believe that anyone wants to hear their story.
It's true.
You sharing everything today just proves how amazing of a gift you are to this world, how valuable you are to this world. And it just shows your journey of growth and self-discovery and self-love. Even through going through relationship after relationship, it can be easy for people to not grow through those experiences, but you grew through those experiences. You've learned from each experience, and you're doing better for yourself. You're learning how to treat yourself the way that you deserve, and the world will follow suit. That you're going to be a life coach and help so many people. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being courageous. And just keep sharing your love. Keep shining your light. Keep showing up. The world's going to take notice. And the people that you are here for are going to receive everything that you're meant to give.
That's what my hope is. And like, so much so that like, I understand how hard it is to deal with almost like basically mental illness, right? Depression, all kinds of different things, but it's real, and people struggle with it, and people don't like to talk about it because they feel that it's another reason for not being worthy, because you have these things, these conditions, whatever you want to call them. And so a friend of mine and myself, we had started actually in October. We started um, kind of like it's sort of like a podcast, but not. It's like it's on X, and it's a show we do every Sunday, um, called BNF Talks, and we talk about mental illness. We talk about depression. We talk about um, many different things, that trying to help people, and put the word out there, and see if we can hit on some topics that might kind of bring people up, and um, is kind of the beginning point for me for trying to move forward in my life, um, and then start with the life coaching soon, and just trying to help people like me, and people have been through things, and people are going through things, and just try to make a difference.
That's what it's all about. I just want to say, Jennifer, I am so proud of you, because it's a whole lot of people in this world that wouldn't be here if they had to endure half of what you've survived. I'm so proud of you, and I love you. I love you, girl. You
Thank you.
are truly a gift and a blessing for this world. And on that note, y'all know this has been another amazing, insightful, enlightening episode of the Confidence Way podcast, where we are rising above our insecurities, releasing the burdens of shame and guilt, and reviving our God-given power, purpose, and passion. The Confidence Way. Until next week, you guys know what I always say. We gon' pew, 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 confetti, 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 confetti.